Today, a new front has opened on the maps. But this front is neither in Donbass nor in Kursk. The boomerang of war has returned and infiltrated Russia's critical life support units, namely apartment buildings where thousands of civilians are freezing, and the energy infrastructure that is the lifeblood of logistics. According to meteorological reports, Russia is currently facing the most devastating and cruel winter disaster in 200 years. In Irkutsk, thousands of people were left without heating at -40 degrees Celsius, and the energy grid in the Amur region was on the verge of collapse. In Moscow, airports have shut down, logistics have ground to a halt, and the entire metropolis has been plunged into a white silence. While fighting imaginary threats, the Kremlin has left the Russian people to face a crisis caused by freezing cold and neglected public services. Today on MrWARLOG, we will decode with all the evidence how Russia failed to cope with the winter disasters, how the war budget stole the people's right to heat, the danger of an energy collapse stretching from the Far East to the Amur region, and how Great Russia is gasping for breath under the snow. The darkest and most strategic news of the crisis came from Russia's furthest point, the Amur region, the lifeline on the Chinese border. Charter 97's report, published the previous day, documents that the region is facing a full-fledged energy collapse, blackout threat. This is not just a technical glitch or a local outage. It is the official collapse of Russia's Far East energy architecture. The Amur networks are struggling due to a surge in demand triggered by extreme cold and infrastructure that has not been renewed for decades. Voltage fluctuations are about to condemn thousands of homes, hospitals, and strategic facilities to absolute darkness and a freezing death. So how did a country that claims to be the world's energy giant become unable to ensure energy security on its own soil? The answer lies in the Putin regime's strategic blindness and the civilian budgets sacrificed to war. While transformers explode in Amur and power lines tear like paper under the weight of ice, all of the Kremlin's resources are flowing into the trenches and defense industry in Ukraine. The parts inventory, engineering staff, and maintenance budget needed to keep the Far East's energy grid running no longer exist, because those resources have now become missiles raining down on Ukrainian cities. At the same time, what is happening in Irkutsk, the heart of Siberia, constitutes an infrastructural crime committed by a modern state against its own citizens. Thousands of people were left without electricity and heating in a single second in the famously bone-chilling Siberian cold of -40 degrees Celsius. Corroded pipes and neglected transformers, left over from the Soviet era, offered no resistance to this extreme weather event. In Irkutsk, people are trying to survive inside their homes rather than waiting for the state to rescue them. This is the most painful proof of how Russia's superpower image has frozen in the snows of Siberia. The greatest tragedy here is the personnel collapse. Mobilization waves and the war economy have driven all civilian experts, from experienced engineers who could repair transformers, to shovel operators who could clear snow, to the front lines or munitions factories. When a breakdown occurs in Amur or Irkutsk, there is no technical team available to intervene. Those who remain are unable to stop this massive collapse due to inadequate equipment and a lack of spare parts. Russia has officially depleted its own civil defense reserves, its own engineering power, and its own people's right to heat in order to invade Ukraine. Charter 97's report warns that this situation is only the beginning. This process of destruction in the energy system triggers a chain reaction. When the electricity goes out, the water pumps stop. When the water stops, the pipes freeze and burst. And when the pipes burst, modern life in that city ends forever. So, as the empire tries to expand, it is blowing up its own energy arteries. What is happening today in Irkutsk, the heart of Siberia, and in rural towns across Russia, is not a simple seasonal hardship. It is an infrastructural betrayal orchestrated by the state itself. In that freezing Siberian dawn, with thermometers reading -40 degrees, thousands of people were left without electricity or heating in a single second. But the truly shocking aspect of this tragedy is not the bursting of the pipes, but the deafening, icy silence from the Kremlin. The Moscow Times February 2026 report documents the massive wreckage behind this silence. During the cold snap in January, power and water outages across Russia doubled compared to the previous year. In total, reports of systemic collapse are coming in from 1,788 different strategic points. So why is the Putin regime not hearing this cry? Because in Russia, the civilians' right to heat is now a mere detail, far behind the illusion of the great victory. Every ruble that would power a boiler in an ordinary citizen's home, or replace those rusty pipes, is now being spent on the engines, fuel, and chips for the Caliber and Kh-101 missiles used to destroy Ukraine's infrastructure. While implementing its sinister plan to condemn Ukraine to darkness and cold, the Kremlin made a strategic mistake. It completely dismantled its own country's civil defense shield and sent it to the front lines. Today, the people struggling to survive behind frozen windows in Irkutsk are actually victims of their own government's war of priorities. TSN and Moscow Times analyses converge on one point. For the Kremlin, the freezing of the Russian people is no more newsworthy than the capture of a village in Ukraine. While state television tells fairy tales about Europe freezing, people in Siberia are trying to survive huddled together under blankets. According to many analysts, this situation means that the social contract between the state and its citizens is being seriously tested. The state uses the taxes and loyalty it receives from its citizens not to protect them on a freezing night, but to burn down a neighboring country. It is not only the roads that are frozen. The Russian state's moral bond with its own people is now at an absolute 0 point. Meanwhile, Russia's strategic highways, the lifeblood of the country, have been transformed from transportation routes into massive metal graveyards under the relentless onslaught of the 2026 winter. While Moscow residents were warned of 24 hours of non-stop snowfall and storms, the logistics network of an entire metropolis was literally placed under a logistics quarantine within just a few hours. This is not a simple traffic jam. This is the simultaneous collapse of a country's supply chain, civilian transportation, and emergency management. Heavy vehicles, trucks, and logistics trucks cannot move even as slowly as a turtle on snowy roads. These massive vehicles, unable to climb even the slightest incline and lacking adequate winter tires or chains, completely block the roads, paralyzing traffic. The result? Hours, even up to 48 hours in some areas, of being stranded. Drivers are forced to wait in their vehicles in freezing cold until they run out of fuel. The solution? Simple in theory. Call a tow truck or wait for snowplows to clear the road. However, reports document that tow trucks and roadside assistance services are unavailable in many areas due to disruptions in public services. This is because the shortage of personnel in the public services sector has now reached an undeniable level. Everyone, from snowplow workers to professional tow truck operators, has been diverted to the front lines or the war industry. This logistical paralysis is causing a chain reaction of collapse. Flights at Sheremetyevo Airport are being canceled one by one because neither staff nor passengers can reach the airport. Tram services within the city have been completely suspended due to icy tracks that cannot be cleared. Stuck trucks are not only blocking traffic, but also hindering the delivery of food and medicine. This situation is leading to empty supermarket shelves and disrupting access to basic necessities. While the Kremlin markets Ukraine and the West as an existential threat to its people, it is once again proving its inability to protect Russian citizens from the real deadly threat: neglected roads, staff shortages, and paralyzed logistics. The state says, "We can't clear the roads, so let's just stop the trucks." But this decision is piling on like a snowdrift to Russia's already fragile economy. Drivers are losing not only their time, but also their nerves and perhaps their lives under this white captivity. Those highway entrances where people wait for hours for a tow truck are actually where the illusion of Putin's functioning state ends. Climate change has delivered its final warning to Russia with these extreme winter storms. But as we mentioned earlier, the Kremlin has chosen to ignore this warning. Because the war budget is considered far more sacred than the maintenance of snowplows, the salaries of civilian personnel, and highway safety. In the winter of 2026, Russia was not only buried under snow, it was crushed under its own priorities, its obsession with war, and its debt to its people. This silent and freezing weight on the highways is, in fact, only part of the big storm. This disaster is not limited to the paralyzed streets of cities or frozen pipes. This climate boomerang, which descended on Russia like a nightmare, has now turned directly to the Russian people's table, that is, to food security. The anomaly we witnessed in the winter of 2026 brings not only cold, but also unbalanced destruction. Sudden and severe shock frosts following unexpected short-term thaws are completely destroying winter crops underground. In regions considered Russia's agricultural granaries, the phenomenon known as ice crusting is suffocating all winter crops, from wheat to rye, destroying them in the fields. The agricultural sector is preparing to close 2026 with the largest crop loss seen since the collapse of the Soviet Union. But the real apocalypse is happening in Russia's massive but rusty infrastructure backbone. For infrastructure experts, this winter is a perfect storm. Railways, expanding and contracting due to temperature fluctuations, are derailing. Frozen switches are tying Russia's logistics network in knots. Worse still, the power transmission lines. Centimeters of ice accumulating on the conductors, reaching tons in weight, are tearing high-voltage lines like paper. This is not just a power outage, it is the complete severing of thousands of settlements from the modern world. On the health front, the situation is a complete humanitarian drama. City hospitals are overflowing with thousands of civilians who have broken limbs after slipping and falling in the snow, as well as cases of hypothermia from freezing in their homes due to inadequate heating. Russian civil defense units, MRCOM, have neither the equipment nor the personnel to combat this white disaster, having lost half their personnel to the front lines. While the Putin regime flexes its muscles on the global stage with Arctic routes in the Arctic Ocean, new nuclear icebreakers, and ambitions of great power, Russia's domestic civilian infrastructure is rotting and crumbling from within like cancer. Climate change is no longer a scientific fantasy or a distant future scenario. It is an existential physical threat to the Russian Federation. But the Kremlin stubbornly continues to ignore this reality. Why? Because fighting the climate crisis does not produce cheap propaganda material like fighting Ukraine does. Fighting climate change means insulation, not tanks. Modern irrigation and drainage, not missiles. Renovated transformer stations, not nuclear threats. While Putin searches for his enemy on maps, the real enemy is knocking on his door with a freezing wind. So, the economics of betrayal, the right to heat or caliber missiles. Let's delve a little deeper into the issue, because this is not just a matter of weather, it is a murder of resource transfer. While Russia's 2026 defense budget has reached its highest levels in history, the public services and infrastructure modernization item has been effectively frozen, lagging behind even inflation. Do you know what this means? The reason that main pipeline that exploded in Irkutsk couldn't be repaired is that the budget to repair that pipe was converted into a missile months ago and exploded in the skies over Ukraine. The Russian people are facing this shocking reality. While the state has missiles, its citizens have no homes to keep warm. While the state's hypersonic weapons glide through the sky, ambulances on the ground cannot navigate roads blocked by snow. The Putin regime is so preoccupied with its obsession to plunge Ukraine into darkness that it either fails to notice or strategically disregards the lights in its own country going out one by one. Where, I wonder, is the sociology of white captivity civil defense? Even more tragic is that institutions such as MRCOM, Russia's civil defense apparatus, have been sacrificed to the war machine. Operators who would use snow removal equipment, electrical engineers who would restore transformers, and teams who would rescue those stranded on highways have either been turned into infantrymen on the front lines or condemned to work 24/7 in the war industry. Russia has lost the technical memory needed to sustain civilian life. If trucks are blocking roads in the heart of Moscow today, it is not because of heavy snowfall, but because the qualified personnel needed to remove those trucks are either no longer alive or waiting for orders in a trench. The snowfall will surely end, the ice will surely melt, but the deep, freezing sense of insecurity that this winter has left in the minds of the Russian people will never go away. In the winter of 2026, Russia was not only buried under snow, we could also say it was crushed under the weight of its own arrogance, its pathological obsession with war, and its ice-cold bureaucracy that turned its back on its people. In short, it is not just snow falling on the territory of the Russian Federation today. The promises, lies, and much vaunted illusion of invincibility of a regime itself are buried under the snow. While Russia accuses Ukraine of not being a state, it has become incapable of operating its airports, keeping its highways open, and heating its citizens' homes in -40-degree weather in its own capital. Russia was not only buried under snow in the winter of 2026, it was crushed under its own lies and obsession with war. So, what do you think? How much longer will the Russian people silently accept this white captivity, where palaces shine brightly but homes freeze? Let's meet in the comments and discuss this great and freezing collapse, this technical bankruptcy of the empire. The MrWARLOG files, which pull the truth out from behind the thick, lie-filled fog of propaganda, will continue. I'm Charlie from the MrWARLOG team. Take care.